Hey crafty people, welcome back to my channel, and in case you're new here, I'm Sarah, also known as Craft Nerd because I'm a nerd who loves to craft. I do paper crafting, card making, junk journaling, and mixed media art. Let's get crafting! Welcome to my channel. So I picked up a bunch of faux book boxes at the dollar store, and I'm gonna alter them to create little scenes inside. Is my plan. But what I want to do, as I've been working on my book boxes, I realized this is probably going to be multiple videos just because of the length. And I realized what I should do is have the first video be the one that I'm doing altering that's going to apply to all 3 books. Then video 2 is going to be the broom and wand shop. Video 3 is going to be the fortune teller's book, and 4 will be the apothecary. So they got printed like the look of book page on there, and I want something a little more textural. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna grab, I've got some golden fiber paste, so we're gonna just use that. And what we're gonna do is take a spatula, take our book, and mostly I grabbed this because I've got a big big tub of it and really need to use it because I've had it for quite some time, and pastes don't last forever, so you need to use your stash. So we're just going to apply some. Now I want to create like drag marks so that it looks like book pages. And yeah, there's a spot. It's not as thick in. And it's probably hard to see the texture that I'm putting in on camera, but once it dries, we're gonna add some inks and some paint probably to it to get it looking like old book page. So I'm gonna do basically the same technique on all 3 sides of all 3 books. And so once they're dry, we'll come back and do some more work on them. Okay, so I finished putting the texture paste all around all of the books, and I gave them a coat of Craft Smart Khaki paint for 2 reasons. 1, I didn't want it to be that white, and 2, there were a few spots where the paste was kind of thin and you could see the printing underneath. And so the next step is we're going to add some watered down distressed paint in Vintage Photo to antique it a little bit more. And I just had a dog scratch to come in, so let me go get him. So I've got some acrylic block, and I'm just going to put a little Vintage Photo on. I'm going to add some water to that because I want it watery, because I want it to just kind of be drippy. And I'm going to grab a paintbrush, get that a little wet, dip it into our watery paint mixture. See, it's not quite as watery as I want it because I want it to kind of do that. And I'm not worried that I'm getting it like elsewhere on the box, because what I plan on doing is covering everything. So, ooh, that's a nice strip down there. Now I'm gonna grab a towel and kind of dab some of it off, because I don't, I want some of the underlying color to show. Wow, that one dripped all the way around. That was a good drip. And yeah, I'm still a little congested from, I got COVID, but I tested yesterday and I am now COVID negative. So just think it's entirely possible my allergies are now acting up. All right, I'm gonna set that aside to dry, and then I think I'm gonna pull out, I think I've got Walnut Stain, because I want to add a little bit more darker bits in, as well as the vintage photo. So we're gonna set that aside to dry. I'm gonna do this exact same process to the other two books, and then I'll be back. Now that it's dry, I'm just gonna go in with Walnut Stain, and if you don't have distress paints, you can just use watered down acrylic paint. Now I'm just going to set this aside and let it dry completely. Okay, well, these are drying. We're going to move on to the next step, which is putting in a framework inside the boxes. Okay, so I want to cover the back, but I don't want to cover it flush with the back of the box so that we can run tiny lights around our shelves without all of the mechanism showing. And we're going to be putting Matchbox drawers in, and one of them I'll put the tiny light battery pack in and switch so that it's hidden. So to get our back piece lifted off of the back of there, what we're gonna do is I've got a bunch of strips. So I've cut, this is a comic book board. You could use chipboard or cereal box, although you're gonna probably wanna do more layers if you're using cereal box, because what I'm gonna do is glue two pieces together, but between them I'm gonna sandwich a piece of cardstock, because that can then provide extra surface area for when we glue in the backing, which hopefully will make sense in a minute. Let me show you what the plan is. So we're gonna take a piece, glue it to a piece of cardstock. And these pieces are 1/4 inch thick because I don't want to lift it too far away, mostly because the matchbooks are going here, but we're also going to be covering the door and hanging brooms on it. So we want to have enough space still left for whatever's on the door to fit in the box if you close the box. So my idea is to only bring out the matchbooks to about there. That should give us plenty of clearance. So that's about 1/4 inch. So I cut strips that are 1/4 inch wide and then a little over 6 inches high to fit in. And we may need to trim up just because the box got a little warped in doing the book pagey outside thing. Technical term for what we did on the outside of that box. So I'm gonna sandwich my cardstock between two of my pieces of comic book board just to get extra thickness, because I want to have as much as possible for my back piece to fit on. And I'm going to set it aside to dry, and then we're going to fold the piece of cardstock over once it's had a chance to fully dry. So I'm going to just repeat that process. Okay, so this should be dry enough. What I'm gonna do is press that down. This way, when we put the box in, or put this in the box, what we're gonna do is we'll glue it. Nope, that one's a little too tall. Let's grab scissors. Needs a hair more taken off. And then we'll glue the comic book board to here. And we've got more area to glue the top piece. So the top piece will go on top, obviously. But we can spread glue all along this section as well as, you know, this strip of the comic book board. So that'll give more area for gluing instead of just gluing this little bit here of the two pieces glued together. Now for the one that I did two, that's because I want to put one in the middle of the piece. So let's help ourselves out and grab our bone folder and kind of get a crease going in. So we'll fold one. I meant to have it overhanging in two different directions. Like, this is not how that's supposed to go. All right, let's pull this off. So we'll have one on the top and then one on the bottom to give me more area for gluing this in the center of the box. This one is a little off size wise. We'll just trim that excess off. Okay, so I started pulling out the pieces for decorating the sides. I'm trying to decide, let's put in these pieces first. So I'm just gonna glue along this edge, put a little along here, and stick this in along the bottom, like so. Let's do this. Turning it up on its side so I can press the glue side to the side of the piece. So I'm just coming in and making sure I press down on that. Check the fit on this one because, yep, that one needs to be trimmed. Just spent little pieces of paper flying across my desk. A little bit more. And that goes in like so. So let's add glue along here and here. These are probably going to be too long because I didn't account for, although they can probably just tuck under. Yeah, let's do that. And yeah, I know this is very fiddly, and this is absolutely one of those steps that you could so skip. I just like giving myself a way that I can hide the lights behind. Push it back into place. Let's leave that sit for a minute. And what I've also done is I've grabbed some Tim Holtz, what is it, backdrops. And I cut it so that it should fit like right on top of that, which it looks like I may, it may be a hair too wide. It's like perfect on the top, not quite on this side. I think I'm gonna glue it in and then trim it off. And I just kind of stuck it in and guesstimated where the fold was and kind of creased it in. So wait, before we do that, let's ink the edges. Use a little vintage photo. And yeah, I know if I cut off, I'm gonna have to ink again, but let's at least remember to start with inked edges so that the spots I don't have to cut off are already inked, so we don't have white showing. All right, now we're gonna glue this in place. Yep, we're definitely gonna have to do some trimming in a few spots. And then I've got another strip to go this way. And yes, there's a bit of a gap there. It was less of a gap last time. When I dry fitted, I thought there was less of a gap there. Because that's not gonna cover that gap. I'll just grab another piece of paper and fill in the gap later. All right, again, let's ink our edges. And these are basically full-length sheets, which are 10 inches, and I cut them to 2.5 because it's 2 3/4 deep. I did the inking, and I'm gonna end up trimming everything. All right, so I'm just gonna go around and clean up my edges. I'm gonna do that off camera so I can hold it closer to me so I can see better. Because yeah, that's getting a little messy there. So I'm gonna do that and I'll be back. To cover the edges and clean up the mess, I'm gonna use a little washi. I think this will work just fine. And I'm gonna add glue and wrap it over, but I think first let's go around with our ink dauber. Just using my finger to spread the glue out. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and do the rest of the sides because basically I'm just gonna run the washi along the edge. I don't want to wrap it around to where our faux book pagey part is. So I'm just gonna have that little bit on the edge here. Actually, it might be easier if I apply glue on the edge here. And I'll still do it on this piece because I need it for gluing to wrap around, but add some extra glue. Okay, so now that they're all covered, we are gonna go ahead and add this last piece in. Get a little bit more trimmed off. Still needs a little off. All right, that's good to go. Let's glue this bit down. This is why I did the 2 editions of cardstock, was so I'd have more surface area for gluing it down in the middle-ish. I think what I'm going to do is put a dot of glue there, and there, and then in each of the corners. All right, so that will let me glue in the back piece, which I've got another piece of comic book board that I've cut down, and I'm going to cover it with this pattern paper. It's another of the Tim Holtz layers, and so that's going to go in there. So let's just glue this onto here. We'll leave that to dry for a little bit. But I'm going to set that aside for a little bit because we need to make our shelves and our other pieces, because we're going to be attaching to here, or at least layering it out so I can figure out where to poke holes for the lights. So after I finished doing the pieces in this box using comic book board, I remembered I had some foam core. So for this box, I used foam core, and I just painted the edges of it black in case any of it shows once I put the piece down for this one and the smaller book. Okay, so I've showed you how to get the texture on the sides of the books and how I set up for putting the piece in the back piece in so that we have space for lighting to go behind the scene in the books. Now what I want to do is for the apothecary and the broom and wand shop, I want the front to be like a wooden door, and then on the inside of the wooden door. So that's what we're going to work on next, is creating our wooden door. All right, so I've grabbed some Distressed Kraft Heavystock, and I've cut it to the size I need. And we're going to ink these pieces up. I'm going to grab some Vintage Photo, some ground espresso, some Scorched Timber, throw in a little Walnut Stain Oxide, maybe some Scorched Timber Oxide. I just want it to be like a varied color for our piece, and so I'm just gonna scoot everything out of the way, try and make some room so that I can work. Ha 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 ha. This desk is a disaster area. All right, so I'm just gonna put some ink down on my mat. Give it a little spray with water. Break up the shapes. Gonna give my paper a little spritz so that it'll absorb better. And we're just gonna add some ink. All right, so I just gave this a dry with my heat tool, because when you're working with distress inks, you need to remember wet on wet blends, so they blend together, wet on dry layers. So if I want another layer, I need to dry it. And I don't necessarily want it quite so splotchy, so we're just gonna do that. Get gravity working a little. And I think this one, let's grab a paintbrush and just kind of do that. And I'm gonna set that one aside and work on the other pieces. And again, we're gonna spritz because we want the second layer to be a little bit more blendy than splotchy, because again, I want rustic wood doors. So I want variation in my color, but like little splotchy splotches don't really fit with that idea. Except maybe as like knot holes, but yeah, that one I'm going to set aside to dry. This hardly got any color on it, so what I'm gonna do is dry this off. and just splotch down some of the darker colors. I don't know that the vintage photo showed up very much. Let's do some Scorched Timber, Oxide, Scorched Timber ink, a little of the Walnut Stain, Oxide, and ground espresso. So basically I'm just leaving out the vintage photo, and let's put a decent amount of the ground espresso because it's nice and dark and juicy. All right, now, because these are going on the outside of a mixed media piece, and since I used distress inks and oxides, getting them wet will reactivate them. I'm gonna do just a light coat of distress glaze, which will seal in the inks and give just a little shine. This isn't something I normally do, but I'm a little concerned because it's going on the outside of mixed media pieces. I'm going to do that to all 4 of the pieces, and then I'll be back. Okay, so the next step is I've pulled out, I've got, this is lumber large, and this is the, I'm guessing lumber. I didn't save the packaging because I bought it before I started doing YouTube and started saving packaging. The regular size, and then this is the A5 size, the new ones that Tim Holtz came out with this year. And this one's numbered 666884. And it's basically, it's the same pattern as this, just scaled for a larger embossing folder. So for our larger pages, because they would not have fit in there, I can use the larger embossing folder, which is why I got it. And I'm very excited about. And it's interesting, like the technology's gotten, I think, better, because this thing, as you can see, pops up more. It's a lot thicker than this guy. Interesting. So what we're gonna do, and I'll work on the smaller one since that'll be easier to do on screen, is this is the side that presses in, so does the debossing into the page. So I'm gonna apply some ink, and I've grabbed my VersaFine Clair in Pine Cone. And we're just gonna ink up. And I realized I did it all the way over there, and the paper's not gonna fit all the way to over there, I don't think. So I'm just making sure I get good coverage on the embossing folder with my ink. And of course, I've got a dog who now wants in desperately. Then I'm going to take my piece of paper and stick it down. Close my folder. I'm going to go take this to my embossing machine and emboss it, and then I'll be back. So here's what it looks like, and you can kind of see that there is ink pressed into it in some spots. Didn't come out quite as well as I would have liked, but I may try using ground espresso archival ink on the next run and see how that works. So I'm going to go ahead and do this for all 4 pieces, and then I'll be back. So here's a sneak peek of what the first book box that we're going to do, which is Madame Malgrie's Wand and Broom Shop, is going to look like. And that's going to be in our next video. But we're going to stop here for today for this video. So that's all for today. If you enjoyed this video, please do all the things that lets YouTube know you enjoyed the video. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, leave me a comment down below. Thanks for joining me, and happy crafting!